Hello, Leo, and welcome to the story of I Am, or in your case, we might say the story of I Am Becoming, your 2020 mid-year reading from Planet Waves. My name is Eric Francis Coppolino, and I am here with a few things about your astrology and a glimpse into the future. There are enormous revelations coming for you. There are transformations that are unlike any of the other signs, owing to the fact that they take place in your opposite sign, Aquarius, and are happening a little bit later in the year. And the purpose of this reading is to get you up to that point and sort of get you situated in such a way as to make the best advantage of these, let's say, this expanded environment of opportunities and relationships that is embarking on your life at this point. I do first want to begin with an acknowledgement of the stressful and challenging times that we are all in. The pain that the world is going through is not necessary, and that makes it even more frustrating. I think that world leaders are at their very best incompetent and at their worst exploiting a situation. It could get, there's even a worse third possibility, but let's stay away from that. That at the worst, they're just exploiting a situation and tending to be playing along with the gang, and so there's very little truth to be found, and it's as if the oxygen is being slowly sucked out of the room. In that case, it is important to keep breathing, make sure that you have windows open and all that. So. Additionally, you went through a spell from about 2017 into 2019 when there was a series of eclipses that came through your sign and Aquarius, and because the eclipses always travel in opposite pairs, and it is probable that you are still addressing some of the material that came up at that time, though. I would propose that this retrograde of Mars in Aries is going to resolve a lot of that for you and help you situate yourself more strongly on a path toward the future, rather than a kind of like being in the status quo, being stuck in one place. That's not really what eclipses do, but what they can do is precipitate challenges that then are very preoccupying. Okay, so let's take a look first at the structural elements of the Leo solar chart, which I will now introduce you to. In this branch of my work, I work with the solar chart. In other branches, I work with natal charts, where there's an individual person. And what's so interesting is that after 25 years of doing both, because I got involved in public astrology about 10 minutes before I got involved in private astrology, working one-on-one with people, though I did begin as a public astrologer, that the solar chart and the natal chart are remarkably similar. A big fuss is made in astrology about having the time accurate and the rising sign accurate, and why in theory it's not possible to work without these things. And what I have found is that if you don't have a rising sign, work with your solar chart. If you do have a rising sign, the solar chart, that is to say the chart of the houses of the sun. So assuming you're Leo sun, that would make your first house Leo, or Leo rising, your first house would also be Leo. These charts work in parallel. So, for example, I'm Pisces with Cancer rising, and I find that my Pisces solar chart works every bit as well as my Cancer ascendant chart in terms of understanding the influence of planets going through houses, and the sign cusps are very sensitive to transitions. And we'll talk a little bit about that, particularly in your case, because there's a big one coming up for you. All right, so here's the Leo solar chart, and we know that it's Leo because the first house is covered by Leo, and the seventh house is covered by Aquarius, and the 10th house is covered by Taurus, and the fourth house is covered by Scorpio. Those are called the angles. Those four houses, they're the angular houses, 1, 4, 7, and 10. And they're all pretty much extensions of the same thing. It's as if they are all kind of like, how to say this? They're like one type of sensitivity that extends itself out in four directions, and actually, if you were to divide those four directions and make a second cross, all of those points are sensitive as well. And so there you have it. And like, for example, if we were to turn the chart to Virgo rising, which I'm going to be doing next, or Virgo sun, suddenly you have a whole different chart with Virgo on the first and Pisces on the seventh. That's a whole different world than Leo on the first and Aquarius on the seventh, not second, sorry, and Gemini in the house of career and reputation, and Sagittarius on the house of home and security. And so small moves mean a lot. And one of the things the small move does is it puts the retrograde of Mars right into your seventh house. Excuse me, I'm not quite awake yet. Ninth house. The ninth is going to match your element. It's Aries. Your element is fire. Aries is a fire sign, and that's how you know that it's a harmonious connection to the ninth house. The other fire sign, the third fire sign, is Sagittarius, also a very important sign as it relates to you. And so now there's two kinds of resonance, one with the angular houses, and then one by your element. Technically, one's called the quadruplicity, and one is called the triplicity. All right, so aside from that little visit to technical nomenclature, the focus of this discussion here today is the retrograde of Mars. And the retrograde of Mars is taking place in your ninth house. And your ninth house, anyone's ninth house represents their spiritual journey in one way or the other. In the old school of astrology, if you would dust off books from the 17th century, you'd be reading about how the ninth house is the house of church authority. It's the house of people like priests. It's also the house of higher education, meaning university and then graduate, postgraduate, things like law school. And it's the house associated with great libraries. It is the house associated with the higher courts. Higher courts are things like the Supreme Court, the appellate courts in New York, the Court of Appeals, the highest court in the state. And so the ninth has this vibration of what we aspire to. And when you take all that, higher this and higher that and higher ed and higher courts and all that, and we translate it into and church authority, and we translate it into modern psychological astrology, we're really looking at spiritual aspiration. We're looking at the desire to learn and to become and to advance oneself. We're looking at all the motives one would seek out the great library or seek out a higher education, and they're not always about money. Many people do. The degree mill is a real thing, and people have gone to the nation's most prestigious institutions and spent $250,000 or $500,000 or more doing so. There's some astonishing student loan debts out there to make a lot of money and to seem like they're really prestigious, but also there just simply is in many people the desire to be a learned person. There's a lot of I think of them as unofficial rabbis out there. They don't have congregations. They were never ordained as rabbis, but they are scholars of Talmudic law, scholars of the Haftorah and all those, just because it's the thing that they want to do. And one of the most interesting bits about having Aries positioned in this location in your chart is that it is in your nature to aspire to greater things just because it's who you are. Is not so much in your nature to aspire to greater things because you want to have some rank and honor associated with it, but rather because you are a person who naturally aspires. You're a person who, for example, travels and learns about yourself through travel. You're a person who sees the spiritual dimension of every place, not just the Great Pyramid at Giza or Temple of Karnak or whatever things that are said to be power places and spiritual places. For you, all of travel is about a learning experience and and an experience of self-actualization, and this is just a very natural state for you. One of the interesting things is that many people see their higher powers outside of themselves. They see deity as a thing that is external to them, that they have to pray to or reach for or in some way aspire to. And one of the most foundational things that I can say about Leo is that your God concept, your concept of this higher cosmic intelligence is directly connected to who you are, directly connected to your inherent and intrinsic being. This is a very different state of mind than most people are in, because you're unlikely to worship at some altar of something, and also it's very likely that you saw through this as a child, and were aware of the fact that there was a kind of a fuss being made when really to know God you have to know yourself. I mean, it seems pretty simple to me. I'm not even a Leo of any kind. The other thing is that there's a sign associated with this type of quality, and that's Sagittarius. And where you have Sagittarius is on your 5th house. This is a house associated with art, with play, with games, with risk-taking, and with the kind of sex that teenagers like to have. Not the, deep and profound kind of sex where you sign a contract at the end, or at the beginning for that matter, and a sum of money changes hands, but rather the experimental and playful form of sex. This further humanizes your spiritual path, your spiritual quest, as being something that is accessible in the everyday world. Why not? Really, does theology even exist? What exactly is the basis of theology? Like, in mathematics, at least we have like integers, and you can say, okay, it all comes back to these numbers and zero, and then you can make new concepts like imaginary numbers, but you at least have to come back to those 10 digits. And with theology, what do you have? Anybody take a picture of God? So you are a kind of a practical theologian, and the quest for existence, the quest for self, is your way of staying spiritually in touch. So it gets better. Here's where we bring in the retrograde of Mars, which is going to go from the end of Aries back to the middle of Aries, covering 13 degrees of Aries between the 9th of September and the 13th of November. This process has been warming up for a long time. It began with the ingress of Mars into Aries in early July. Aries. So we've now had approximately 2 months of Mars in Aries, warming things up and getting things moving and shaking and making many of the same aspects that the Mars retrograde is going to make, only making them in direct motion. And many of them, we'll go over them in a moment. So you're well into this process now, and it is also, well, it's a process of self-discovery, and it is a process of getting closer to your direct experience, right? Mars, the ruler of Aries, by the way, in Aries, Mars wants direct experience. That's the thing. Mars doesn't want to think about it, talk about it, contemplate it or anything. Mars wants to get busy and do the thing. There is, before we get into the technicalities of the retrograde and some of the story that it's telling of your unraveling your kind of concept of core self and going there, is that in the spring of 2018, Chiron, it's not a very nicely drawn Chiron, but Chiron arrived in Aries. Hadn't been there since the late 1970s. Chiron spends 9 years in Aries, and Chiron in Aries in the ninth house is let's say a building upon and direct extension of everything I'm going to say about Mars retrograde and everything I'm saying about your ninth house in Aries being in alignment. And then, and further, I think that this Mars retrograde is a kind of preparatory academy for making the most of the long-term visit of Chiron to your ninth house. And so you couldn't want a better image of the quest side of Chiron. The spiritual quest, or the quest, does not need to be necessarily a spiritual quest. It can be a mission. It can be going to the moon. It can be any number of things. Is fully embodied by this placement of Chiron, and that suggests that this is a time of really bringing forward this this personal religion of yours, where you understand that you embody the center of your world. This is a beautiful illustration of Leo, because Leo is the only the only sign that is ruled by a star and not a planet, and all the other signs are ruled by a planet, with the one exception, being Cancer, which is ruled by the moon, and the moon is kind of the opposite of the sun. It is a luminary, but it's this little thing that goes around the Earth. As far as the sun is concerned, everything goes around the sun, and that puts you at the center, but it also puts you at the center with this position of tremendous responsibility, because you understand that it is your role to hold your world together. You are not interested in projecting responsibility onto other entities or other people. You're very much a get the job done right by doing it yourself kind of a person. Okay, so one thing to notice about this Mars retrograde is that it is beginning right here at this point called Eris. It's a little bit past Eris, and Eris is in an aspect to all of these things here, but particularly the longest lasting aspect is a square to Pluto. And Eris takes 558 years to go around the sun. Pluto takes 248 years to go around the sun. They do not make any aspect often. We've never lived through a Pluto-Eris aspect since the discovery of Eris, and that was in 2005, and no one knew what it was before then. It was active. There's good research that I've got on transits that are, evidence that this thing was active, like many discoveries are active long before it was cited, named, and put into the books. But this Mars retrograde that begins mixed up in the square between Eris and Pluto, this very slow-moving, powerful generational square, is being activated by Mars. So whatever this thing is, and it's not always easy to see a square between planets that are so far, that if you were to make a representation of them using the city of Kingston as a map, and this were the Earth, Mars would be the building across the street. You could probably, if I stood on the roof, maybe throw a rock at it, and Pluto would be like way out in Hurley, like it would be out of town. That's how far away Pluto is. And then Eris would be like in Oneonta, even further. So, therefore, these are concepts that are not easy to personalize. We can feel their process moving. Things are happening and changing, and there are these little earthquakes, and there are life patterns that are all altering. And the square of Pluto and Eris certainly is talking about some major patterns of the world changing, as we can see through these patently ridiculous events and unnecessary events that are unfolding and that are being used deliberately to completely rewrite the world in a way that we'll never get back. As if everyone was just completely bored with their lives. I will admit things were a bit over the top before COVID. There was, everyone was the king of cool, and everything was so exclusive you couldn't get into it, and every restaurant was too busy, you couldn't get a seat and all that stuff, and things have settled and calmed down quite a bit. But nonetheless, the world is being rewritten, and I'll show you in a moment where we see the evidence of that. And so this aspect that is rewriting the world is also the one that is being knocked on, activated by Mars retrograde. And this is happening in this rather intimate angle in the chart, where it is the place where you seek your connection to the cosmos. You seek your connection to existence. One of my theories of astrology is that wherever Eris is, let's just use, for example, let's borrow the, we got ones here. Let's borrow the chart for Libra. If we use the chart for Libra and we look up at the ninth house, Gemini is on the ninth house. That too is pretty human, but it's a whole different feeling than Leo. For example, someone with Gemini on the ninth house might be much more inclined to seek their spiritual connection through their community, because Gemini is about the local community and one's family. That's a whole different reality than having Aries on the ninth house, where you seek your spiritual connection through a direct connection to yourself. And so when we put Mars there, and when Mars is the ruler of Aries, getting all mixed up in this square of Pluto and Eris, and activating a thing that is shaking up the whole world, this is a direct personal invitation for you to radically inhabit, embody, and become your like the full embodiment of your personal spiritual power. And you've got this going on for a while, and this is a long haul thing with Chiron there. And one interesting thread that all of these things have in common in terms of your spirituality is that Mars is a planet that represents self-assertion. It represents aggression. It represents the drive to change, to move, to aspire, to get things to happen, to make things happen. Pluto, which it's aspecting, is a deep hormonal sexual force. So we've got one sexual force in the form of Mars, one sexual force in the form of Pluto. Eris certainly has a sexual aspect. You can think of Eris as being the aspect of sexuality that is the quality of the feminine that is disavowed for the sake of appearances, right? So, mostly we want to be seen as being acceptable, prim, and proper type of people, and not too saucy to be in civil society. Eris doesn't care about that, and as a result, can be cast off. And so that's the juicy part of female sexuality, that cast off part, especially when it's reclaimed. And so that is there. And then just to emphasize the point, you're already born with Sagittarius on your fifth house, meaning that you know that that play and sexuality and sexual play and art and sexual art and play and sexual play and art studios and a little risk taking in there and a little bit of gamesmanship in there are all associated with the journey of being human, and that being human is the most important part of being spiritual. I love these spiritual books that make it seem like everything human is unspiritual and everything spiritual is unhuman. I guess we can really thank the Catholics or the Manichees for that. So now comes Mars retrograde, acting on all of the above, including making a square to Jupiter, which is going to set off your fifth house as well, because it's ruled by Jupiter. So as Mars goes retrograde, it's going to make square aspects to a conjunction to Eris, and then a square to Saturn, a square to Pluto, and a square to Jupiter. This is about working this process of embodiment and incarnation now not only as a spiritual pursuit, not only as the apotheosis of you're striving to make contact with your higher self, which for you is a very natural thing, but also a healing path, because the sixth house is about healing. House number 6 is the healing space, and this is where we find these three houses, which by the way have planets, which by the way have represented some form of a health crisis. Or healing crisis that has gone on for a while, and is likely to be finally resolving itself. If you've made it this far, you're doing pretty good, and you want to keep doing more of whatever it is that you've been doing that's gotten you to the place where you are. So the retrograde of Mars, you might say, ignites Eris, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, and the entire aspect pattern that connects them. And this is likely to come in some form activating your curiosity about yourself, of feeling the connection that you have to something much larger through being aligned with yourself. Leo's a great sign. This is why Leo's a great sign. We all could learn a lot from this orientation, and it's a good thing because you will be setting an example through this orientation. And so this brings together your personal quest, your spiritual quest, your sexual evolution, and your healing journey all into one concentrated kind of final final exam of this massive Capricorn era that has been going on, by the way, since 2008, with a peak in 11-12, and then another peak in 11-12, then a peak in 16, in 2016, 2017, and then now this kind of big hurrah that is going on. Where this is all going is perhaps the most interesting part of this, and may potentially serve as incentive for you to really do this fully consciously and do this well. Because when Jupiter and Saturn here station direct in a little while, they're both going to enter Aquarius in mid-December, and then they're going to form a conjunction on the winter solstice of 2020 coming right up. So the year begins with a conjunction of Saturn and Pluto, which is like approximately 36, 37 year conjunction. And then the year ends with a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. That's a 20-year conjunction. In the middle of it is the repeated conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto. That's about a 13-year conjunction. In the midst of the square of Pluto and Eris, God knows how often that happens. It could be one of these events. It's like every 100 years or something. Like, this is rare astrology right now, and all of these things all going off at once are why the world is such a fucking complete circus right now. The thing is that your point of adjustment is about adjusting your spiritual orientation, your relationship to yourself in such a way that aligns you deeply to yourself, such that when these planets reach your seventh house cusp and form a conjunction in the first degree of Aquarius, the most sensitive degree of Aquarius from the of any sign from the standpoint of solar astrology, because it's activating all of these house cusps, is representative of your entering into a world with much more potential, many more people to support you, and a whole new and very unusual phase of your relationships. So the world you have been in has been very much dominated by this Capricorn alignment in the sixth house, and that's like work and toil, healing, work and toil, that may not seem to be going very far, or maybe not seem to be going any place, and then all at once the planets station direct, and then they form this conjunction on your seventh house, and it's like, oh, that's what's been going on. So the preparation stage of this retrograde of Mars, and of Mars's aspects to all these planets in Capricorn, is saying, finish the work of those planets in Capricorn. Get that shit done. Take care of business. Take care of that healing work. Get yourself stabilized and organized, and get ready. Get ready for a bigger set of circumstances and much more interesting things to happen, and a greater sense of potential, and the readiness and the getting readiness is about knowing how to be fully centered in your own being, which is really the only true confidence. Your awareness of your relationship to the universe, your awareness of your point of contact with the greater intelligence in the universe that informs all of our lives and invented our DNA and all that stuff, is through you. That's when you are with that, walking with that, working with that, there you're truly confident. And so, you need seek no further than yourself. Listen to your own inner teachings and wisdom. And then as Mars makes this retrograde, this very distinct thing, and by the way, the last time Mars was retrograde in Aries, under a whole set of very different planetary conditions and global conditions, was in 1988. Looking at a friend's chart up there, it's who was born in November of '88, and that was right at the end of the Mars retrograde. So Mars was retrograde much earlier in Aries in 1988, but has not been retrograde in Aries since then. Okay, I could say a lot more, but it, in many ways would be repetitive. One last thing I'll add, we've got a few minutes left here, is that there is one additional very large and new transit that began around the time that Chiron entered Aries. Chiron and Uranus are moving at about the same speed now, and when they're moving at about the same speed, which happens from time to time, they hold an aspect for a long time. For example, many of you are born with the opposition of Chiron and Uranus, and that opposition was exact something like 45 times, because based on just a quirk of the way that the solar system was organized in the 50s and into the 1960s, the Chiron Uranus opposition just kept going on and on and on. Now it's a semi-sextile where they're both in neighboring signs moving at about the same speed. And the upshot here is that this also tells us that Uranus is moving through your 10th house. Your 10th house is Taurus, so that's a hint that the Leo soul likes the stable career. Leo soul wants to develop a clear understanding of responsibilities, and then those things are stuck with. Put Uranus there, everything's completely upended, which is good for you because it means you can work in a world where everything is being completely upended, which happens to be the world that we are in. So don't be too attached to your plans. Keep an open mind. Keep reinventing yourself. And more than anything, allow yourself to embark on this, what I'm thinking of as a soul retrieval journey of Mars retrograde in Aries, talking to all of the planets and points that are making this time in history what it is. As the Grateful Dead would sing, you know it's going to get stranger, so let's get on with the show. Thanks for tuning in. Please do remember to check your sign rising if you have access to it. My work works very well for both sun and rising sign, and some people say the moon as well. And you're welcome to share some of these readings with people close to you. If you think that it will benefit them, of course, please send them back our way. But I want my work to have the benefit that it is designed to have, and so if here's something here that you think might be useful or helpful or in some way exciting or interesting to someone, please make sure that they find out about it. Once again, thank you for your business. Thank you for trusting me as your astrologer, and bye for now.